everyone. It is a great passion to share my interest and expertise in programming bits and atoms with you. In fact, if you look at our planet from space, you won't find 200 plus squabbling countries. And if you look deeply into nature and technology, you won't find separate academic disciplines. And that's why we encourage you to be unapologetically interdisciplinary in your approach to technology. Not being interdisciplinary can come at huge cost. Let me give you an example from computer science. You may recognize this machine, a stored program computer, as Charles Babbage's difference engine, which he designed in the period 1847 to 1849. And he couldn't build it at that time because the gears of his time were not precise enough. Babbage died a very disappointed man. And yet, if he had worked with an interdisciplinary team, they might have said to him, "Charles, what are you thinking? You can use this device, a telegraph relay, to build an electromechanical computer now." Imagine how different our world would be if the computer revolution had started in the 1840s rather than the 1940s. Computing and AI enable us to process bits and information. AI vastly amplifies our pattern recognition capabilities and our problem-solving skills. And robotics and nanotechnology will enable us to program molecules and matter. We don't have atomically precise manufacturing yet, but when we do, it will alter our relationship to atoms and matter, like the computer altered our relationship to bits and information. These technologies are altering the playing field, completely disrupting the playing field. They're not just game changers. Let me explain the difference between linear and exponential thinking to you, because that turns out to be the key to understanding how rapidly these technologies are advancing. If I take 30 linear steps across this stage, you can predict where I'll be, 30 meters away. But if I take 30 exponential steps, 2, 4, 8, 16, 32, 64, 128, 256, 512, 1024, etc. 30 steps, I'll be over 1 billion meters away. And just to inform your exponential intuition about that, it's 26 times around the planet. This is a graph of what $1,000 will buy you in calculations per second. And this is from Ray Kurzweil, and it turns out that in the mid-2020s, $1,000 will buy you about 10 to the 16th calculations per second, the approximate computing power of a human brain. Not necessarily as intelligent as a human, but just calculations per second equivalency. And in 2050, $1,000 will buy you 10 to the 26th calculations per second, or the approximate calculating power of all human brains. That is not very intuitive. It's a real challenge to our understanding. And not only do we have the challenge of understanding exponential technology, but AI is amplifying the rate of change. The great Greek mathematician Archimedes said, "Give me a place to stand and a lever long enough and I'll move the world." And AI is more than a lever. It's a fulcrum that increases the leverage of all of the exponential technologies: robotics, nanotechnology, synthetic biology, and others. So we are headed for change, and it's not just the more things change, the more they stay the same kind of change. It's radical, disruptive change. You may recognize this guy who said human history becomes more and more a race between education and catastrophe. That was H.G. Wells in his Outline of History, 1925. All of us have a common problem. we're surfing in front of a huge wave of information, 10 to the 21st bytes of information, or zettabytes of information, and our brains did not evolve under that kind of information processing regime. In fact, the human brain hasn't had a major upgrade for over 50,000 years. And if your laptop or your smartphone hadn't had an upgrade in, say, 5 years, you'd be appropriately concerned about that. In addition, the brain has built-in bugs and biases in cognition, in particular status quo bias. Status quo bias leads us to believe that the future will be pretty much like the past, only maybe a little faster. But no, it turns out that the future is different, sometimes surprisingly different. And if our design criteria for building around future prospects are too narrow, you can end up with a real disaster, like the BP Gulf Horizon disaster. And what we see here is that 11 people were killed, and BP managed to dump 5 million barrels of oil into your food chain and mine. I don't know about you, but I find that unacceptable. I think we can do better. I think we can do a lot better. And exponential technologies like AI and robotics are part of the answer to that, not the whole answer. Someone who understood the importance of improving and augmenting decision-making was Doug Engelbart, the gentleman in the middle of the screen here. And Doug not only was the inventor of the computer mouse, but he also gave a remarkable demo in 1968 for the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency, or DARPA, that demonstrated a system called Augment for augmenting human cognition. And here we are 40 years later at a workshop for decision makers at Stanford University, and it's still a very hard and challenging problem. Let me give you an idea of how fast AI is advancing. In December of 2013, a UK company called DeepMind demonstrated a powerful convolutional neural network, you can think of that as a pattern recognizer, combined with reinforcement learning, which predicts future reward. And this agent was applied to 7 different Atari 2600 games. It knew absolutely nothing about these games. Starting from 0, it outperformed on 6 of these games, it outperformed all the other approaches, and it outperformed a human on 3 of these games, human experts. So let's look at a quick video clip of Demis Hassabis from DeepMind demonstrating this AI agent on a game called Breakout. The agent starts not being able to play the game at all. And then after 120 minutes, it plays at human levels. And after 240 minutes, it develops a novel strategy of going up the left-hand side of the game, tunneling through to the back wall, and playing off the back wall, which was a novel strategy where the game doesn't have good defenses. Take a look at this. Here you see that the game ball is hitting the floor, so the agent is not very good. It's not playing at human levels yet. Now it's playing at human levels after 120 minutes of training. But watch what happens after 240 minutes. It's coming up the back wall and playing from the back court. Look at the score it's racking up. That is a real breakthrough on Breakout. A month later, Google acquired DeepMind for over $500 million. So things are moving very quickly. People often ask me, what is it that AI doesn't do particularly well? Well, AI is getting very good at perception, at recognizing images and recognizing speech. It's been very good at symbol manipulation for decades, doing first-order predicate calculus, etc. And it's just now beginning to nibble at concept development. Here's Dilip George and his company Vicarious, which announced in 2013 that the vicarious AI agent was able to solve the CAPTCHA problem. That is the problem of identifying distorted letters and numerals on a website where you have to type in that in order to prove that you're not an AI spider bot. That's no longer a valid test for differentiating humans from AIs. In addition, Vicarious showed an AI agent a single image of a horse, the only image of a horse that it ever saw, but it had seen other quadrupeds before, and they asked this system to predict what the horse might look like in different configurations. And here is what the horse imagined, what the system imagined a horse might look like. You can see that this is just the squeaky beginning of AI's ability to imagine systems in different configurations in the future. It's an early beginning, but still impressive. The champion machine learning algorithm is the deep learning algorithm invented by Geoffrey Hinton at the University of Toronto, yes. And that algorithm is very general purpose and has been key in developing image recognition systems. You may have read that Mark Zuckerberg of Facebook hired Jan LeCun of New York University and is starting 3 different AI laboratories in London, Menlo Park, and New York. And Facebook announced that they can recognize at a 97.35 level the faces in the Wild database. And humans can do about 98%. So we're coming up to human levels of processing. I just met a company in China recently called MegV that announced 99.5% accuracy in recognizing these faces in the wild. All of you have heard about the win of IBM Watson against the 2 world champions in the question and answer game Jeopardy! The system was not connected to the web at the time that it won, and it trounced the competition, getting more points than each of these world champions. And let's look at how IBM is now framing AI and Watson.
Technology has helped us go further. Go faster. Go to the moon. Solve problems previous generations couldn't imagine. But can technology think? Watson can. IBM Watson is a technology unlike any that's come before. Because rather than force humans to think like a computer, Watson interacts with humans on human terms. Watson can read and understand natural language, like the tweets, texts, articles, studies, and reports that make up as much as 80% of the data in the world. A simple internet search can't do that. When asked a question, Watson generates a hypothesis and comes up with both a response and a level of confidence. And then Watson shows you the steps it took to get to that response. In a way, Watson is reasoning. You don't program Watson, you work with Watson. And through your interactions with it, it learns, just like we do. Every experience you give it makes it smarter and faster.
Yes, and that smarter and faster bit is probably what led Elon Musk to tweet on August 2nd, 2014, that we need to be super careful with AI. It's potentially more dangerous than nukes. But to Elon's credit, he was with us at a invited-only conference for 40-plus AI researchers, where we signed a letter about the need to do additional research on safety mechanisms for AI, in particular in verification, validity, security, and control. I believe that our quality of life is directly related to the ability to process information and matter. Well, what about our ability to process matter? Any way you look at it, manufacturing is about manipulating molecules, whether in large numbers or one at a time. The historical trends in manufacturing are clear: increased precision, decreasing cost, increasing flexibility, and complexity is now free. You can now design something that's extremely complex on a CAD system, push return, and it costs the same as something that is very simple. 3D printing is just the beginning of the story. The Economist magazine had a cover story about the revolution in 3D printing. It's great, but it's not atomically precise. They were able to print a Stradivarius, and it sounded remarkably like the original. You may be familiar with Baxter from Rethink Robotics. It's a pick-and-place robot that has decreased by an order of magnitude the cost of this kind of robotic arm system. And just a few weeks ago, Rethink Robotics announced the Sawyer platform. Sawyer has a much longer arm than Baxter, and it also has a camera on its arm to do image recognition and aid it in positioning the arm to do pick and place and other precise operations. This is really a remarkable machine. Very elegant, and that long arm, although it looks odd, out of proportion with the body size, is exactly what the customers were asking for, a la Eric's comment about listening to customers. But we can do something more than macro-scale manufacturing. Richard Feynman pointed to the need to manipulate individual atoms. And in fact, 30 years after his 1959 talk at Caltech's cafeteria, Don Eigler and colleagues did succeed in spelling out IBM with 35 xenon atoms on a nickel substrate. 30 years. Molecular robotics in manufacturing, atomically precise manufacturing, hasn't fully happened yet, but we're nibbling at the edges. And when we get it, we will have the ability to specify 3D structures that are small or very large. The maturity is R&D, it's not a typical VC horizon yet. There was some controversy about whether this was possible or not. A number of us testified at the National Academy of Sciences workshop on the feasibility of molecular manufacturing. And in 2006, they came out with this report called A Matter of Size, indicating that yes, indeed, molecular manufacturing would be possible, and we need a roadmap. And we're working on a roadmap, in fact, published one the following year. Redwood trees are an example of solar-driven molecular manufacturing that cleave carbon from carbon dioxide, synthesize glucose from the carbon, polymerize the glucose into cellulose, and that makes wood. And you can see you can make very big things out of that. Convergent assembly takes us from the nano size to the macro size in 30 steps. Zyvex had been working on that. And manufacturing costs will eventually be the cost of raw materials, the cost of energy needed for manufacturing, and the cost of design or intellectual property. So we're going to see a real revolution in manufacturing. You may recognize this as the garage that HP was born in. Assuming zero new technology breakthroughs, I believe that professional work is ripe for disruption. People often ask us, how do we deal with that? How do we think outside the box? My answer is, there is no box. We all live in alternative mental prisons. The function of education is to blast us out of our mental prisons and get us to see what the possibilities of the future are. And that's what leads me to tell our students that sustainable human intelligence requires mathematical, ecological, and ethical literacy. That's a longer conversation. We can have a conversation about that in the breakout session. I encourage you to build the future boldly, but do it responsibly. Remember, our skies are not the limit. Thank you very much.